Yes, it's my pleasure to welcome Canadian Craig Symington back as our presenter at our last National Narrow Gauge Meet of 2021. This kind of seems fitting as Craig presented at our January 2021 Narrow Gauge Meet on the topic of writing for the Gazette. So he essentially is bookending an NNG year for us. So Craig will be providing an end-to-end look at his 24-year-old and counting project of modeling the Rio Grande Southern from Ridgeway to Rico, plus the Telluride branch in HON3. This project has provided the inspiration for many of his articles in the Narrow Gauge and Shortline Gazette and is his way of giving back to this great hobby. Craig, we're all looking forward to your layout tour.
Okay, I'll get started then.
That's good, Craig. We've got you.
Okay. So get started here. So I'm, I guess, off the beaten track, probably more than anybody else. I'm up in Northern Ontario in Canada. So not too many of you get coming or end up coming through this way, I imagine. So as Dave said, I've been working on this layout for about 25 years. It's a some parts of it are almost finished, and other parts of it are a tremendously good example of a plywood Pacific. So I kept bugging Russ to put a couple of really nice plywood Pacifics up for the months before my presentation, so you wouldn't be disappointed. But unfortunately, he's had some pretty stunning layouts for the last few months. So I modeled the north half of the RGS from Ridgeway down through Placerville and around, of course, the Ophir Loop, Telluride down to Rico. So I call the layout my Silver San Juan. It's the first district of the RGS. The layout itself is point to point, and I tried to model the scenes as best I could. The era is set for basically it's September 1941. I picked that because there was a fair bit of traffic on the line because of the war, and September just because it's a scenically beautiful time of year. So the layout's in a 26 by 26 room. It's 26 feet down each of these long wings, and these side wings are, I don't know, 12.5 feet or so. I designed the layout so it could be, you could walk around and just follow your train from end to end. So the start of the line is right here at Ridgeway, and I modeled Ridgeway Yard. We went down the Rio Grande side of the lake of the Y and through Placerville. It goes around. There's a hidden area here underneath Rico, comes back out at Vanadium, Vance junction, and then this whole wall here is 26 feet long, and it's the Ophir Loop, and that's gives me my rise to the upper level. The whole thing that I wanted from this layout is I wanted you to be able to grab a throttle, run your train, and just walk with your train. You didn't have to go under duck unders or scooting around peninsulas or trying to chase your train. All the turnout throws are on the fascia, so you basically run in the line, switching as you go. And that's kind of the design I was shooting for. So the upper level, I think there's about 16-inch or more rise between the lower and upper level at about this point. So that kind of gave me a natural transition to an upper level. There is no helix. I tried to keep the mostly running, like just a lot of scenery on the upper level because it would be difficult to switch. So I have a Trout Lake here for passing siding. Bridge 51A is at the end of the aisleway. And then the highest point on the layout is the Lizard Head Pass, where I have the snow shed. You can actually see the tracks kind of crest and hump up here at the highest point. And then it starts working its way down. It squeezed in Burns Canyon and then to Rico. And the end of the line's here at the wall. You also see on here is my Alamosa staging yard. And I forgot to mention on the previous slide is the Montrose staging. Halfway through building the layout, I had some operational problems. So I decided to build this Telluride branch, and it takes off from Vance Junction and runs down the fascia and ends up going into these modules that I set up in my rec room outside the train room. When we're not having an operating session, these fold up and go underneath the layout. It's not the most ideal situation, but it was something I ended up having to do. So just a few quick stats. Like I said, it's 26 by 26. The Telluride branch is about 17.5 feet long. The mainline run from Ridgeway all the way to Rico it's about 200 feet of mainline. Point-to-point design. Most of the track on the layout is hand laid code 55 and 40. I originally was trying to be somewhat pure, and I made the main line 55 and the sidings and stuff were 40, but that tended to be problematic, and you couldn't really tell the difference. So I ended up relaying most of it to 55, but there's still some 40 in different places. And I don't use PC boards. I don't like the look of them, so it was all hand spiked, and it still is all hand spiked. I build all my turnouts in place. It's just kind of what I've always done. I try and shoot for a number 6 or greater, but sometimes it works out to be about a number 5 or even up to a number 8. Each of the towns I tried to create keep the grade matching the prototype, which also had its issues. Like the Vance yard is on a 1 point something % grade, so that makes the cars roll. So that was a bit of an issue. The maximum grade is 3.5%. That's on the Ophir loop. I use Easy DCC for my DCC system, and it's all wireless throttles. The motive power is, of course, Blackstone and brass. And the rolling stock, I've got all sorts of Blackstone, of course. And I like building kits. So there's tons of kits on the layout, and there's quite a few scratch built cars. Most of the structures are scratch built. I have a few kits. I don't know if Joe Fuss is on here, but I love his depot kits, so they're all over the layout. And like I said, I'm trying to follow the prototype RGS in September 1941 as much as possible. Over the years, as I've been modeling, there's other things that have been kind of interesting, so I've deviated from that a little bit. So in my basement, this is the entrance to the train room. It was I kind of modeled these doors as if you were walking into the Ridgeway or into the the RGS's office in Ridgeway. So let's step inside and we'll take a walk down the line. So when you walk in the door, this is basically what you'll see. There's a peninsula here. That's Ridgeway. Ophir Loop is over here, and Vance is around the corner there, and this is Montrose staging yard. This is taken from the other end of the aisle, looking back at those doors. Ophir Loop here. This little ledge here goes down to the Telluride branch, and then we got Ridgeway here again. So if you took a turn around the corner, if you're in this scene here, just to the right here is Ridgeway. You're looking down the back aisle, and there's Placerville, old Placerville. The tracks loop around this way and go under some hidden tracks, and they come back out here. The vanadium mill will be there, and then we got Vance Junction here. And on the upper level, Trout Lake passing sidings here. There's Bridge 40 or 51A back there, and Lizard Head Pass up here. So if you walk down to the other end of the aisle, look back, this is what you'd see is Placerville, Lizard Head, Vance Junction, Trout Lake, and then Vanadium. Around the corner at Ridgeway, the tracks go up into this last little spot for Rico. Can't really see it in this picture, but I had to raise the floor. I ran out of basement to drop the tracks down to a more manageable level from Lizard Head. And so the floor is raised up here, I don't know, about 14 or 16 inches. And you take 2 steps up, and up in this back aisleway is Rico, and Montrose is down here, and that was kind of an afterthought. So if we start our journey at Ridgeway, I modeled it basically as per the prototype. It's just shrunk in length. It should be a lot longer this way. And I treat the RGS main line is actually the Denver Rio Grande main line. Instead of following the prototype and going up here towards Dallas Divide, it made fit in their train room a lot better just to go as if that's on the real ones, the Montrose branch. And this would run down to Ouray down here, but this is sort of how I modeled it. And then I've got this non-prototype track into Montrose staging. So we'll board our train here at Ridgeway at the depot, and we'll take a run down the line. Usually what I do is if I have visitors, which you're all my visitors tonight, I usually hand you a throttle and have a train set up and say, hey, go at it and run down the line. I kind of find that's the best way for anybody to enjoy the layout. So we'll do that virtually. So just some pictures of Ridgeway here. The engine house facility and everything is sort of partly built and there, and the depot is at this end. Looking from the other end, the Y is here, and the yard tracks. A lot of the scenery is just kind of roughed in here. It's been a poorly neglected part of the layout. So I modeled pretty much most of the yard as it was, a little bit compressed. Eventually I'll get the I've got a CC Crow kit for the roundhouse here, and actually on my workbench right now, the turntable. After 25 years of having a hole in the layout, I'll probably finally get a turntable put in. We're gonna go around the corner here and go to Placerville. That's the next slide. So around here, you make a turn and you end up in Placerville. I modeled it basically as the prototype was. I didn't model the Y, I had no room for it. The Y should be down here somewhere, but everything else is following the prototype. So eventually it'll look something like this with the depot, the RGS warehouse, the other, what is it, flour mill or minute mill supply warehouse, and then the business district. Right now, it's just got the, that's a Bragg's depot. I scratch built these 2 warehouses, and actually got those monster model works kits for some of these buildings back here. Just haven't got to them yet. So that's the business district. So scenery's kind of roughed in. And this is looking back. The tracks wrap around this bluff and turn into Ridgeway here. The Y is actually right there. When I took this picture, my back is to Old Placerville. So here's still photographs, not too bad, even though a lot of the scenery isn't done yet. So Placerville would be about here on this map. I really thought that, well, who doesn't like the scene at Old Placerville where the 3 canyons come together and that Leopard Creek coming together with the San Miguel. So I had to model that. And this is what it looks like right now. Also roughed in scenery. So this will eventually be the I guess the industrial spur, for lack of a decent name. I'm going to model the Conoco facility and put some stock pens down there. And on the inside of the curve here, got a place for this, I don't know, it was a store or something here in the well building. So plan to eventually put that in here. Actually, I'd like to do that soon. So the tracks curve around here, but the aisleway ends right here. And this goes back and does a big S turn. It actually goes underneath this scene and comes back out to the left. So when you're following a train down the tracks, you don't have to go anywhere, but just wait for it to come back out to see you again. So another shot of the spur, not much there yet, although we are dropping off oil at the future Conoco location. Around that curve from Old Placerville, there's a place I call Brown. Operationally, I just needed a place for the water tank, and there was a little bit of scenery back there that you can see from the aisle. So I seen it just a little bit back there. This is somewhat fictional. Where the track turns here, it does a big lazy turn back, and you can't see any of that from the aisleway. So behind there is the water tank. It's modeled after the one at Brown. My friend, the late Keith Cook, built this model, the Omega tram house, so I put it in there. Eventually going to run some, I got some of those anvil models, the ore buckets I'm going to string across the tracks here and finish scenicking this up. So just to the right here, the scenery ends and it goes behind the backdrop and disappears. Eventually it comes back out through a bluff and comes out at the Primus mill. You know, I've lectured on this a few times at the narrow gauge conventions, and unfortunately I procrastinated on building this. This is going to be like a year-long project, so I haven't really jumped into it. So right now there's just a place for it and lots of plans, and I had a mock-up at one time. Eventually this will be the view. That's basically the final rendition of that mill in 1921 until it was torn down. And looking back, it will be the front of the mill. I threw this picture in. This is probably the last picture that shows the front of the mill. These buildings, most of this building and this dumping shed were I'll model those because they were there in 1921. This section is totally different because it burned after this and looked like that other picture. But on the layout, I kind of had to squeeze it in. It's this thing is almost, this mill complex is over 3 feet, maybe almost 4 feet square in HO scale. So I had to turn it sideways to put it in here and kind of squeeze it in. The tracks come out of this rock cut from underneath the old Placerville spur, and then they come up here in the main line. This is the first switch leading into Vance Junction. So at Vance, the main line follows the back as the prototype did. Past the coal pocket, I modeled all that, and the section houses. I ended up, from an operational standpoint, I needed a Y at Vance, and the real Y would have been down this Telluride branch at Ilium, and it just wasn't practical to put it on the anywhere on the layout. So in this corner, I've got this sort of fictitious version of the Y, the Ilium Y. And the reason why it has to be here is because Vance this is about a quarter of the way down the line, and from here to Lizard Head is all steep grade. So when we're during operating sessions, sometimes you have to double the hill, and there's a Y at Lizard Head and the Y down here to turn your engines. And also when we operate, the train comes up from Telluride and it needs to turn to go back to Telluride. So it's a little fictitious, but it's necessary from an operational standpoint. So most of you know what this picture looks like with the section house and the coal pocket and the 3 tracks at Lizard Head, or sorry, Vance Junction. And this is what mine looks like. So the 3 tracks here, the coal pocket, and then the section house is up here. Same thing again, section houses, coal pocket. Oh, and oops. One more time. And then the coal pocket there. Excuse me. That coal pocket's, sorry, what's that? Getting a mental block on who did that. Just a couple pictures they took at Crystal River Products. some eye candy shots. So that's a scratch built RGS 03, and then some kit bashed maintenance away cars. Doing some switching at Vance Junction. So photographs up, not too bad. So when we turn around the corner from Vance Junction, we're looking at the Ophir Loop here. There's three, lost my cursor. There's three lines. This is the branch down to Telluride. And so that's obviously not prototypical. There's the low line runs along here and then hits Bridge 45A, and the town of Ophir's back here. And then it comes back and the siding ends there, and then it starts hitting trestles and rock cuts all the way up. And we'll see more of that in a second. So this is standing down near the door and by Ophir, the town of Ophir, and looking back, same thing. There's that shelf to Telluride, and then the other two lines. Shot of this is extra 456 running up the hill. So at the end of the run up the hill, take a turn out to Bridge 45A. It's I think it's 2 or 3 panels short of the full length, so it's about 4.5 or 5 feet long. Turns around through the town, does 45B, and then there's the siding here. That's pretty key operationally for us, and that's what the scene looks like. Probably saw this on the Gazette if you're a subscriber. Here's another shot here with Goose 7 going over the trestle. And then the town site. So all the structures here are scratch built. I know there's Bantam made models of most of these, and I think the depot, there was somebody else made a model of it years ago. When I started this layout, a lot of I was just married and just starting a family and didn't have a lot of money, and so I ended up, that's why I hand laid the track, and I always just kind of scratch built the buildings, and then I just turned to liking it. So most of the structures are scratch built, even though there are some really good kits out there. So I was kind of looking down the street scene. Every layout's got to have an Ophir loop, right? Then there's Bridge 45B, and then the flume. We wrote about that in the Gazette. That's all scratch built. So there's a siding back here. Just put this in so you can kind of get an idea of the line. We often have meets here, and it's helpful for switching the tram house spur at Ophir. I need some more trees in here to call this done. I modeled 46A, following the prototype. It's kind of hard to tell in the picture. 46B is also there. It's following the prototype. And then C, also following the prototype. And they're all full length. And then there's D. This was, I think, 2 or 3 panels short of full length, but otherwise it's the same as the same length as, almost the same length as the real one, and it is the same height. I didn't have room for E and F, so these are sort of renditions of what they could be. I tried to follow generally what they were, what they looked like, and some of the style, like the construction styles of them, and so they're kind of a fill-in. Here's that Y I was talking about, that for Ilium down below it. One of the kind of regrets in the layout is I put this Y in here, and every non-railroader visitor comes to the house and asks me where the tracks go, and they love this tunnel. And I'm trying to explain to them that RGS didn't have a tunnel, but I had to put this in here so that the tracks were long enough to turn an engine. So I hope to put some trees and stuff over there to hide it. So once you get off the last trestle, the Ophir loop, you're on the upper level. So this is kind of the transition point. There's rocks there. This area here, I called Otto's Puzzle just because on the prototype there was Matterhorn and then Otto's Puzzle. So that's basically, it's just straight running a track. So that sheep grazing and crossing the tracks up there. So our train's gone through there and those sheep are still in the same spot. They never seem to move. But this train's approaching into Trout Lake siding. So Trout Lake siding, I'm not sure how long it is. It's long enough to hold a 13 or 14 car train, so it's long enough. Basically, it's just a water tank and siding. There's pieces of the lake at each end just to kind of give you the look and feel that you're at Trout Lake. And that's the scene. So there's a little bit of lake showing right here, and the water tank's up here. The south switch is about there on that curve, and then north switch is, I think, just back here a little bit to the left. Pretty much all it is a water tank up there and some telegraph poles and trees. So there's a shot. That's the start of there's the north switch right there. This is 7's rolling downgrade coming. The south switch is just ahead of them. And if you've been to the real Trout Lake, which I'm sure most of you have, that road from where the water tank is now up towards the trestle kind of meanders along the lake, and that's sort of what this section's mimicking. There's the same area. The train running down the trestles over here, 40 or 51A. So at the end of the aisleway, if you're staring down the aisle, my layout, this is what you'd see right at the end is bridge 51A. That's actually really scenic when a train goes around there. Probably should have put a picture in there with a train on it. This model of the trestles is exactly like the original one, as much as I could make it. This section here is I kind of, it's a famous picture. You've seen this lots in the RGS books of the trains running up here. I kind of wanted to make this similar scene, and part of the reason for the way this is designed is the track here is getting up probably I don't know, here it's probably over 5 feet above the floor. I'm 5'7", and most of my operators are the same height as me, so standing from the aisle, you end up looking up through the trees here at the trains, a little bit similar to the scene that the photographers used, because I think they were standing on the highway across the valley photographing the train. So it's actually kind of the idea here was that most people couldn't see the train because this view block is in the way, and it snakes along up the through the meadows of Lizard Head. Then you come into Lizard Head Pass. So there's I modeled the snow shed after the fire, so it's not full length. And there's a Y there for turning engines, and then a passing siding. And it didn't have quite enough room to keep the siding straight, so it curves around the corner here. And actually where it ends up is where coke oven siding is. So I don't know, I'm gonna probably scenic it a little bit like the coke ovens area. So right now there's another long unfinished project of the snow shed up there from each end. And I think these are buildings and structures kits I built a very long time ago. Siding. And you go around the corner, here's the Lizard Head siding. The switch is right here that ends the siding. I had this kind of funny little area above above the Ridgeway yard, basically where the yard tracks are. So I built a model of the trestle at Burns Canyon. So I'm gonna probably scenic this in here, and you can kind of peek through it through a little bit of a dip in the fascia from the aisleway. The trestles there, I gotta stain the concrete or abutment things here, piling things. So when you come around the corner, from Burns would be here, you come around the corner, you come into Rico. And I modeled the this track plan needs to be updated, but I basically kind of had to squish in Rico to make it work. Modeled the engine house and the yard and the depot and all that. I didn't have much room for the propatria. And at the other end, this is sort of a conglomeration. For those of you that know your history, the Y moved from both sides, from each side of the track. I think the coal pocket is a little farther down. So it kind of got all mashed in here to make things work. And this is the end of the line when it hits the wall. So if you're standing on the steps up to get into Rico, this is what it looks like now. The depot's here. That's a rags kit. That's a modified Durango press kit to look like the Rico water tank. That's a future project. There's castings I bought from somebody for the engine house, and the tracks here. And the end of the line is back at this backdrop here, and the idea is eventually to look like this. So looking back, there's the engine facility area and the depot and the water tank. The propatria will be mostly a flat on the wall back here. This is my most unfinished part of the layout. I was never really happy with this, so I rebuilt it once, well, twice, maybe 3 times. It's as good as it's going to be now. Hope to do some scenery on it soon. Well, I forgot to mention, the idea what I'm going to do here with the scenery is I'm going to have it, I'm going to fill this in so that when you're walking down the aisle here, it'll be like looking down this canyon. So the scenery and everything will be painted on the backdrop here, so it'll mimic this view here. I think that would be pretty cool. So at the end of the very unfinished here, I got the Rico cold pocket and the Y here for turning engines. Down below here is that's where that brown tank and the Omega bin are. The tracks are in this. The loop is under here somewhere. So eventually actually I built this. The Rico cold pocket's pretty much done. And it looks like that, and the Y will be something like that. So now I got this Telluride and Pandora branch. So that's looking back into the train room on ops night. So when I built the layout, I originally, we always operated on it from the beginning of whenever all the track was put in. And originally I would keep the stuff at Vance Junction. All the cars would stay at Vance Junction that theoretically went to Telluride, Pandora. And same for Ridgeway and Rico, that anything that would have been an interchange off the layout just stayed in the yard. And then I had this problem that I was building kits like crazy, and then the Blackstone stuff came out, and all of a sudden the yards were plugged. So operationally, the layout just died. So I started pulling the cars off the layout and putting them in storage, and then putting them back on every operating session. The cars are getting beat up, and I was getting really tired of that. So I built this Telluride yard, and I didn't have any room in the train room for it. So out in the rec room it goes. And I also built Montrose and Alamosa yards, which I'll show you at some point here. So this is what it looks like set up. Those are the doors to the train room. Ridgeway is right here. And this is the town of Telluride, and this will be the town of Pandora. Like I said, a really nice plywood Pacific. So here's Pandora. It's stored underneath Rico. I wrote about this in the Gazette a long time ago. I made these legs that were like ambulance gurney legs, so they fold in a parallelogram, so you can lift the modules straight up and the legs flop down, and vice versa, so you can keep everything level. So I actually keep the cars on the layout. Can't really see it very well in this picture, but there's a car right there. Eventually this will get scenic. So Telluride connects on here. Here's the connector to that shelf that we saw in the front of Ophir. The town of Ophir is right above here. So this is the module rolled out into the rec room on the floor, ready to be set up. Telluride gets shoved underneath Ridgeway, and that's what it looks like. I roll it out on wheels, and then it's got the same legs. So I get somebody on one end and I get on the other end. We lift it up and the legs flop down, and it's freestanding from there. So Telluride, I'm modeling the kind of the main area with the house track and the siding, kind of as it was. The real prototype, the tracks ran down a ways to the towards Pandora, and there was a bunch of different industries on there. There's no way I had any room to model of that, so I put a couple spurs in as representatives of real industries that were once there. There's just a view of the Telluride. So the engine house, I'm going to model that. I already have the depot. It's a rags kit. I'll model these section houses. Conoco is right here, and then there was a couple coal sheds down this way that I intend to model. Just another shot here, just a little eye candy for the presentation, so you don't have to look at just plywood. So Conoco facilities, there's the depot, and then of course Pandora's way in the distance. So my model of it here is same thing. I'll put the engine house down the spur. There's a scale track, and then the house track, and the depot is right here. Eventually the water tank will be down here. Looking at it the other way, you can see this section of Telluride spans the doorway. The doorway is right there. Basically this bump right here is giving room for the door to swing out. And then the tracks connect in here, and then of course go up all the way up to Vance. So one of the jobs in the layout is to run the Telluride branch. You bring cars back and forth between Telluride and Pandora, and up at Vance up here. So looking back on the Plywood Pacific Telluride here, this will be some industrial buildings here that we talked about, and this is another one here. I think that was a lumber yard I had planned there, and there's some coal sheds and stuff at some point there. And this section here is basically looking down around through here. I needed a Y at the end to make this work, and had no room for the real Pandora because there's so much going on there. So what I'm going to end up modeling is I have the Y put in so we can turn trains, and I'm going to put the Smuggler Union Gray Mill here will be partially on the layout, and it'll kind of spill right up to the side. And that's our major industry down at this end, and takes a lot of cars during an operating session. So I'm going to model this section with, you probably won't see a whole lot more than this of the mill on my layout, and then the Y actually does kind of look like this. And I thought this picture is pretty neat because we actually, during an operating session, you will see a caboose sitting on the Y, sitting while the engine's being turned. So pretty representative of what you'd see on my layout if it was all plywood. So here it is. The gray mill will span this track in this area, and then the Y you saw here. So I've also got almost a staging. Like I said, the Rico was getting cluttered with cars that were going offline for operating sessions. So I came up with this Alamosa staging thing, and I wrote about this a long time ago in the Gazette, and I had no real place to put this. I'd never imagined that this would be a problem when I started the layout. When I started the layout, I needed a couple hundred cars, and I never imagined I'd go way past that pretty quickly. So this came as an afterthought, and basically it's a 5-track yard, and from an operational standpoint, we I basically swapped cars from this yard over to Rico, and that's another job during an operating session. So this is basically where it connects on that we saw where the Burns Canyons is down in here. And this is a track going into Rico. And I just call this Alamosa Junction right here. There's just a switch there that goes out onto this piece of track. I built this section like a hollow core door, and it hangs from the ceiling. So this is the same looking from the other side. There's the track around to Rico and the raised area. When you're operating, basically stand on a stool right here, and an operator would run the switches. There's a bunch of throws right there. Here's basically what the yard looks like. All the switches are all controlled with the same pull throws along the front here that I have everywhere else in the layout. I actually scenic it, so it looks like a yard. And I don't know how many cars. It's like 60 to 100 cars it'll hold in here. It's quite a few. And so that's there's Ridgeway down below. You can see the door into the train room there. So it just kind of hangs from the ceiling. It's worked out really good, actually. It was way better than I ever imagined. The only problem is I'm always worried somebody might fall on it or something. I got 100 cars that are destroyed. Below Rico, I created Montrose staging. So I had the same problem at Ridgeway, as the yard was just plugged, and with cars that should have went off the layout. So I was going to create just a basic staging yard underneath Rico with unscenic track and everything, and I ended up getting a little bit overkill. I use Ship It for my operating sessions, and it always wants an industry or something as a destination or a source for a commodity. So what I did was I created for any ore that was being shipped off the layout, I created this general ore receiver, and any freight that's going on the layout, I have this general freight supply. So the warehouses, the mines would be looking for dynamite or whatever, machinery or whatever. So from an operating standpoint, it starts here, and like the Alta Tram House, for example, is shipping out high and low grade ore on my layout, and it ends up here. So I ended up, and then of course the Conoco facilities need to be supplied with oil and gas. So there's a Conoco facility here that's the source of all that. So what I did was I created this yard similar to the Alamosa one, to create a destination off the layout, a fictional destination off the layout for cars to arrive and come from and go to. So, and the reason why it's called Montrose and Alamosa is from that end of each end of the RGS, that was kind of the farthest real town on the real railroads that anything would go to or come from. So Montrose was, when I originally built the layout, there was a curtain here and there was nothing underneath Rico. So I ended up putting this layout piece in here. So it's just a switch off the Ridgeway yard. And it uses the main line here as a switching lead. So I plan out my operating sessions pretty strategically. So once all the trains are out on the main line and they're around the corner here at Placerville and down the main line, that's when I call in somebody to do the staging job, because they end up taking over this area. So what it does is that job ends up bringing cars from Montrose over to the Ridgeway yard, grabbing cars from Ridgeway and bringing them back here. It ends up being actually one of the more challenging jobs in the layout, and not too many people can do it very well. And the reason is I put dual gauge track along the back two tracks as if it was the real Montrose, and we were doing an interchange with the standard gauge. And so it's some pretty tricky switching in here and short leads. Plus some jerk that owns the layout puts an idler car and a standard gauge car in the way all the time. So adds a pile more moves to make things happen in here. So basically this is, a glorified staging yard, but I started building buildings along the back for flats for that freight. This is the freight supply, and that's the ore receiver. And then this is actually Cook Brewery for my friend Keith Cook, late friend. And that runs the San Juan Swill, fictitious, but that goes to Telluride, sending reefers full of beer. And then the Conoco facility will eventually go back here. And I left a cutout in the backdrop back here and put a bridge over top of the tracks. Theory was that maybe if I needed more staging, I would go through the back of the backdrop and just extend these tracks, but I haven't done that yet. So just some shots. There's the lead into the yard, main portion of the yard, and of course the end. And some switching action, and look at this, somebody put a standard gauge car in the way. So that's kind of fun. I actually would like to, I think I have another kit for one of these. This is a Rio Grande Models kit. I might build another one, throw a couple more standard gauge cards in there just to be a real jerk on operating night. Some more views there. You can see that there's 3-rail track on these back tracks. So I talked a lot about operations. Big part of the experience for me, like, is operations and sharing the layout. I enjoy building stuff, and that's why the layout isn't finished, and I don't want it to be finished, because when it's finished, I'll tear it apart. So I really enjoy building the layout, but the other thing I really thoroughly enjoy is having other people enjoy experiencing the layout. So I host a lot of operating sessions, hosted a lot of people from out of town, and then we've got a regular crew here. And some of the probably the biggest joy I have about the layout is the camaraderie we have in that room, and how many good times we've had in there. And I really like having visitors. So especially even non-railroaders, when people come in there and they light up and go, "Wow, that's pretty cool," it's really rewarding. And I've always had a pretty open policy with kids too, as I've had lots and lots of kids come through the layout room and run trains and stuff. So, and usually sometimes I get them going running cars and banging some cars around. We'll do a little bit of an operating session too. So, and that's about it. So thank you for listening to me. Hopefully my audio was turned on through the whole time you actually heard me. And if you want to see more, I've been setting up this YouTube channel, so putting some odd videos there. So it's just, I don't know why they put a C in there, but it's my name. And so if you subscribe to the Gazette, I write a column in there. So you'll see me every month from now till who knows when. And that's it.
Okay, well, Craig, we've got some questions for you. They came in on chat, and an awful lot of compliments. So if you're set, we'll go ahead and get started on these.
Sure.
All right. So starts out, the first one is from Daryl Jacobs, who says, "I got to run to dinner, but Craig, your layout is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to watching the video a bit later." So you're going to get a call back on that, it looks like. Dave Woodrell says, "Did you paint your backdrops? It's beautiful work."
Well, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I painted all the backdrops. I guess they're a combination of Bob Ross and Greg Gray from St. Louis. So I do all the sky and a lot of the techniques that Greg Gray did in that Green Frog video, and then I use that, whatever, the magic knife thing that Bob Ross did. One thing I do when I started this layout, 25 years ago, Dale Kreutzer was about the only one doing photo backdrops back then. He must have had deep pockets because they were expensive. And since then, the prices come down a lot. And if I were starting again, I would go with photo backdrops for sure. They look so much better. But I'm too far into it now that I wouldn't change. But I appreciate the comment or compliment. They turned out okay.
Okay, well, great. The next one is from Keith Stamper, who says, I've got a technical question. I'm a former HON3 modeler from the 1970s, and my nemesis was humidity as I lived in South Africa. I would like to know, Craig, have you installed Keep Alive devices in the brass locos, or if you've managed to overcome intermittent operation in some other way?
Well, I could tell you, I could do a whole hour on humidity.
Yeah.
First, I'll answer that a couple different ways. First of all, I almost tore the layout apart because of humidity. I had such a problem here. So my house, because of being in Canada and it gets cold here, I go from 20% to 80% humidity in the train room. And I can't control it. No matter, and what you didn't see in there is there's a furnace in there, and thankfully the building inspector doesn't come and find that furnace in the middle of the layout because it's kind of tucked in there. Because the furnace is in there, I can't control the humidity in the room. As soon as you turn the furnace on, it sucks all the air out of the room. If I dry it out, it just replaces it. So I ended up rebuilding a lot of that layout, and I think you saw in the Rico pictures that the plaster popped on the backdrops. I had to go back and go after it all and redo a lot. I ended up I rebuilt a lot of the layout because of the humidity, and it still grows and collapses. That Ridgeway yard, I used Homosote on the top of it instead of cork. Most of it's N scale cork, and at the time I could only find 4-foot square sheets, and those sheets will get at least 1/8 of an inch gap between them through the seasons. And I didn't paint the wood. I know you should paint it and all that stuff, but I'll never use Homosote again. And that layout, those 26-foot runs was growing and shrinking by probably 1/2 an inch, and things were buckling. It was crazy. Keep in mind, when I started the layout, I was 25 years old, just starting a job, a career, just got married, just had kids. I didn't have money for 3/4 inch plywood and all that kind of stuff. I didn't use cheap materials, but I used just regular spruce strapping and like 1x4s, and that's what I could do. And I wouldn't do that again. But on the locomotives, I mostly, I cheat and I run the Blackstone stuff mostly because it's less aggravating, and there are no Keep Alives in any of them, and they run great. So, but what really, and I do put Keep Alives in the brass. They all have Keep Alives now, but that's just kind of a recent thing because the Keep Alives were always too big. So only in the last couple of years have I been adding them because TCS makes that. There's one that's the size of the end of a pencil, and that's the only one that'll fit. The others are kind of big. I forget what number it is, but I'll use that one. What I did to solve my electrical problems and all that is, and this was a lesson learned out of that humidity problem. I put all the track down. I put a lot of feeders. There's thousands and thousands of feet of feeders in that train room. And what I found was I learned a hard lesson. First of all, I didn't solder any of the rail joiners together because that was just a bigger nightmare with the layout growing and shrinking. So I ended up having to go back and gap a lot of make the gaps bigger to accommodate for that. And I learned about 12 years into the layout that the rail joiners are for joining rail, not conducting electricity. Because of that humidity, they oxidized in the joints. And about 12 years in, I found out where I didn't put rail or feeders in. I'd probably 95% of the layout ran and 5% didn't. And they were all the places that didn't have feeders, the electrical wasn't going through the joiners anymore. So if I soldered the joiners or I put a jumper in or something, they'd all of a sudden start working. So what I ended up doing was, I don't know, probably 15 years in, I went through and I wired every single piece of rail on that whole layout, no matter how small, even if it was a couple inches long, I put a feeder on it. And I went through and I redid all my switches. Every frog is powered and all the points are, or sorry, the moving rails are all powered. And after I did that, the thing runs really good. So that's how I went after the humidity problems and all that stuff is just overkill. But it, you know, it runs really good for an HON3 layout, but it's not perfect.
Okay, well, thanks, Craig. That's if nothing, that's dedication to the hobby to get that going.
It's a sore head from being underneath the layout, soldering wires after the scenery's in.
Okay, you've got another compliment from another gentleman that had to cut and run for dinner. He says it was a great presentation, wonderful looking layout, and he'll be back for more. Another compliment here from Larry McDonald in Toronto, saying you've captured the flavor of the RGS, a layout that displays really well, and it's great modeling. He says, and I also like all the scratch building you did. So let's see, Bill Basaka out here on the West Coast says it's really, really nice. He also says, this is important, I'm glad to see another RGS modeler who hasn't finished everything.
I think I even got probably the oldest projects too on the layout. I can go up to 25 years of unfinished stuff or half finished stuff. So I don't know if Bill can beat me on that one or too many other people.
Yeah, another compliment. This is from Jonathan Sauer saying it's fantastic work. He's just starting his own layout planning and was thinking of doing something similar to your area of the RGS, but an SN3. He says, but I'll have to compress it even anymore. It's a great looking layout. Lori McLean from Down Under. Great presentation, Craig. Thank you. And the season's greetings from Down Under, Lori.
Thanks, Lori. I thought you were going to ask me where's all the animations.
Yeah. Jim Brown. That's somewhere up in the Vancouver area, I believe. Says thoroughly enjoyed the tour. It's a beautiful layout. I see the knobs on the fascia are for what I presume are turnout controls. Are you using a type of a choke cable for this?
What I'm using is I call them Cook Industries turnouts because late friend Keith Cook put me onto them. They're just slide switches underneath the layout. I kind of designed my own thing that works is I guess the plastic part sticks up, and then there's two I've used pieces of K&S brass tubing and with screws up through the holes, and then in the top of the plastic I guess would be the knob for it that slides back and forth. There's a rod that goes straight up and goes through a PC board, and then I hook on a piece of what is that? That's piano wire that goes to the fascia, and those are just wooden knobs. So you just kind of slide them in and out, and it throws the points back and forth. And by using those double throw, and some are triple throw. I power the frogs with all those, and reverse the polarity on the Y. So it's kind of, not my idea. It's been done a million times, but that's what I do. And some of the turnouts are switch motors where there was bench work in the way and stuff like that. And I still use those slides to control the bench work. So the whole layout is, except for the three ways, everything's all identical. So the only regret on the thing is other people have done that idea and they've always had the, normal positioning is always in. I didn't do that, where you have to reverse the cam and stuff like that. So the rule on my layout is visualize the turnout and visualize the points moving as you're pushing them in and out. And so it works pretty good. At the time, they were like, when I built the layout, they were inexpensive. I could build a turnout for like $1.50, and and those slide things, I could make another one of those for like $1.50. So it was economics. There's, for the layout, the switches that are on the layout, there's over 100 turnouts on the layout, and there's probably about 50 failed ones that are in the garbage can. So that's what I use, and they work really good. I'd definitely do something like that again. They're still pretty inexpensive and they work well.
Okay, and I suspect you probably answered a similar question that Pete Smith had, because I think you covered everything from soup to nuts in that. The next item is another kudos. It says, Craig, you published, as Mike Telcott, you published a YouTube video of a cab ride several years ago. He says, that's been one of the most inspiring pieces to me over the last decade.
Appreciate that. There's I didn't give a plug for it yet, but the next Gazette, I got an article coming up on doing some video on the layout, and when that Gazette comes out mid-January, I'm going to put up a new video on the YouTube that'll be kind of neat and a little different, and it's similar to the cab ride thing.
All right, neat. Steve Hollenbeck says, great layout. Hugh Urquhart says, thanks for sharing, Craig. It's a beautiful layout. Let's see, Mark Evans, nice layout, Craig. Thanks for sharing it. Rainer Gilpin board, he says, how many operators do you need or want for an operating session?
Well, if you're available, come on up. Generally, we have I have 9 throttles, and that's actually a little much. Usually there's about 6 people in the room at a time, but an operating session I can handle up to maybe 10 or 11 people. What we do for an operating session is usually we just run all the freight trains, and if I have 5 or 6 people, that's ideal. But if I get more than that, then we'll run the geese. So I got 3 geese that they're there to do their thing and screw things up. One will run from the whole line from like Rico to Ridgeway. One will run from Ridgeway to Telluride. Another one will be Telluride to Rico or something like that. They do like a triangular circuit, and that'll get me up to 9 people or 8 people. It gets a little crowded in there, so generally 5 or 6 is ideal. And I've probably hosted, I don't know, hundreds, maybe 1,000 operating sessions in there. So usually if I have a visitor coming to town, Dave can attest that, he's been to my place. We'll just come and bang some cars around for a couple hours. And usually a session lasts 2 to 3 hours. Mm-hmm. It depends. And usually guys get tired too. So we're pretty casual.
All right. Yeah. Keith, after listening to your battle with humidity, says, oh man, you've suffered as I did. So much is the same, humidity.
I actually redid when we moved into this house, it was almost brand new, and they didn't put an air exchanger in. They cheaped out and it wasn't code. So I actually put an air exchanger in the house and spent like unbelievable amounts of time and mostly some money redoing the whole HVAC system in this house to accommodate the layout. Plus, as our family grew, the windows were getting really wet upstairs. Yeah. So you wouldn't believe what I did in this space to make it work. And really all the other stuff in the layout it was everything to come together. So.
Okay. Last we've got, Jake Sweeney, basically from Gibson's BC, says you've got lots of hours. Excellent presentation. Could you go over the module section drop-down leg design? So I think he's referring to your to your Telluride sections on how that gurney leg system works.
I have to bring up pictures to kind of explain it. And from Gibson's BC, that's the home of the beachcombers. Well, only the Canadians on here will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's the home of the beachcombers.
Oh yeah, is Molly's Reach still there? That restaurant?
Molly's it never was a restaurant in the movie set, but it is now.
Oh, I'd like to go there someday.
Well, if you're coming this way, let me know ahead. I'll certainly host you.
I appreciate that. So I wrote about this, if you go, I don't know if you're a subscriber to the Gazette or not, but I wrote about it and there's pictures and diagrams and stuff about 8 years ago. Basically what I did was, I don't even know if I could pull up pictures. You know how if you watch a paramedic go put a gurney into the back of a ambulance, they just shove the thing on the wheels. The gurney's on wheels. They shove it against the back of the gate of the ambulance, and the wheels flip up, but there's wheels underneath the gurney itself, so it just keeps rolling level into the back. So on the modules, the legs come down and they've got bars across the bottom to keep them all together, and they're on hinges, so they'll pivot together. And when it drops down, there's wheels underneath the actual module pieces, so then they end up on the ground and the legs are up above, so it rolls around on these other sets of wheels. So just think of a whole parallelogram. If you took a table with two sets of legs and you tipped it over and they both went like this together, that's basically how it works. It's pretty hard to describe, but
Yeah, no, maybe I'll have a look at if it's still on your website on YouTube.
yeah, I don't have anything on the YouTube site for that.
Interesting idea.
Yeah, it was a matter of necessity. The other thing is that the way it was designed, I also between the modules, I made them like Lego blocks. There's round pins between them, and because we host, like Dave came up here, we've had guys from the States quite a few times come up. We have operating sessions, and then I need to be able to set up quickly. So with this leg design and these pins in the ends, I can set up that whole section in under 5 minutes, and I can tear it down in about 2. So it was kind of the whole thing was a bit of a necessity, because when we have our ops weekends up here, my rec room becomes kind of the main place to be, and with those modules in here, it gets really crowded. So it made it so I can break it down and set it up, super quickly. Still a pain in the ass to do, but I wish I didn't have to do it, but that's sort of the deal.
Okay, well, at this point, I think we've exhausted everything that was in chat, and we're coming up on 7 o'clock. And Craig, I sure want to thank you on behalf of the rest of the NNG folks and everybody that's been in on this for the presentation and all the work you put into giving us a fine tour of a fine layout. And you're right, it's a great layout, and I love. Yeah, the couple of days that I was able to spend with you guys, it was an awful lot of fun to operate. It runs as good as it looks. I mean, that's the thing I came away with. It's just marvelous.